Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Take a Stab at It. I'm your host, John Hoyer, and with me, as always, is...
Jason Barch, whose job is apparently on the hot seat because you are testing other co-hosts, right?
We included a good friend of mine on the last week's episode, and you know what? Everyone loves him. Everyone loves Trevor. He's a great third wheel.
Trevor's a good dude, man. It was a lot of fun having him on. I can't tell the future, but I have a good feeling we might have him on again.
Yeah, even though I said it directly last week. All right, well, how you been, man?
Good. How's your week been?
It's been good. It's not like we're recording these back to back. The veil has been lifted.
Let's not pull back the curtain too much, John. Whoa, some tricks of the trade.
I'm actually in my underwear right now.
Where's your video, by the way? I can't see you.
That's on my OnlyFans. All right.
Behind a paywall.
All right, let's move on to what we've been watching. Jason, what have you been watching this week?
So I recently watched a little horror film from 2016 called The Autopsy of Jane Doe. And
Ooh.
I really enjoyed it. It kind of snuck up on me. I don't know a lot about this film, if it was popular for its time and I'm just late to it, or if it's kind of like a hidden gem. I'm not totally sure. Like I said, it came out 2016, 4 years ago at this point. The director is the guy who did Troll Hunter, which I know has become kind of a cult classic.
Trevor said that was really good, by the way.
Yeah?
Yeah. So
okay.
If he would have been on this episode, maybe he could have said something about it.
I've heard a lot of good things about Troll Hunter. I've never seen it personally, but who knows? Maybe that's what I'll be talking about next week. But so the film, it's Emile Hirsch and Brian Cox, who are both do tremendous work in this, and they're a father-son team who both work in a morgue and perform autopsies. And the film is kind of a slow burn. It's these two characters performing an autopsy on this unknown woman, Jane Doe. And as the movie progresses, they're discovering that strange things are kind of going on with this body. Like things they've never seen before in all their time doing autopsies. And they keep kind of justifying them like, oh, it could be this, it could be this. But it gets to a point where you really can't explain kind of the weird things that are happening with this corpse. And as it goes on, things kind of get creepier and creepier. And it's a really good example of a horror film that succeeds in kind of unseen horror. Like what we don't see is scarier than what we do see. And, you know, it lets the imagination run wild a little bit. And I don't know, it snuck up on me. I thought it was very good. The performances were great. There's a nice father-son kind of drama dynamic to the whole thing, which I thought worked really well. But yeah, I don't, like I said, I don't know if I'm late to the party on this one. I've talked to some people who have seen it, some people who have never heard of it. So I really don't know where it falls, but I'd recommend it.
Yeah, I've heard great things. It sounds awesome. So I'll check that out.
I do think you would like it. It's really cool.
I'm putting it on the list, Jason.
So what have you been watching?
I watched a movie called Zombie, which sounds generic, but it is a Lucio Fulci movie from 1979. So last week I watched The Beyond. This week I watched Zombie. Last week I really liked the movie. This week it was okay. So weird. I don't know. Some people might know about this. Some people don't. But in Italy, Dawn of the Dead in 1978 was released as Zombie. And then this movie was released as Zombie 2. But in the US, you can't just call something Zombie 2 if there's no Zombie 1. So It just was released as Zombie. So it is an unofficial prequel/sequel that doesn't have anything to do with any of the characters, but it is about like the beginning of a zombie outbreak. And it is an interesting setup, but it is so drawn out in the second act that I can't quite recommend it fully, because even though the third act, it has some really great action sequences and like fights with the zombies and whatnot, it just takes so long to get there. And I was almost like yelling at the screen, like, come on, I get it. They're there. Like,
how long is the movie?
It's only like an hour and a half.
Oh, wow. Okay. I gotcha. Well, you'll have to forgive me if I don't go rushing to see that after your lukewarm review. Tonight, we are talking about Suspiria. And hold on, I know what you're thinking. This isn't deja vu. I know we just did this, but today we're talking about the 2018 remake of Suspiria. Yeah. And this is going to effectively start our more modern series of cult films. So in the past, we've done kind of older classics, and now we're going to shift gears a little bit to do some sort of modern films. And we thought it would be nice to kind of go back to back with the Suspirias here. So the synopsis of these films is very similar. They both follow Susie Banyan, who is attending this prestigious dance academy in Germany. Strange things start happening, and lo and behold, we discover that the studio is run by a coven of witches.
Not again.
The meat and potatoes of this film is very similar. A lot of the characters are the same, but that's about where the similarities stop, would you say?
It's interesting. I kind of liken it a bit to the difference between Alien and Aliens. Alien has it alludes to certain things, a bad corporation that doesn't care about humanity. And then in Aliens, it's very overt. So in this one,
the political unrest is much more overt in this film.
It's interestingly more overt, but also not explained enough. So it's almost a little hard to follow.
We didn't get enough, yeah.
With what we said last week was that the aesthetic of the original was more of a fairy tale aesthetic that hints at more serious themes, and this film recontextualizes the original story in a way that gives a more honest and deeper account of the time both films take place. To give a little brief summary, there's a lot of political and cultural unrest. There's a group called the Red Army Faction. They're a left-wing group that basically, there are a lot of people that were still in high positions of authority politically in West Germany that were former Nazis or people that had high positions under the Third Reich. And this group was, one could argue, justifiably not happy about Nazis still being in power.
Yeah.
So they kind of would use violence and bombings and all sorts of stuff. And there's other events taking place in other countries at the time. So there's hostages, they're taking planes and all sorts of stuff. So pretty crazy time period. And I think that the main portion that we really should kind of dig into in regards to this film is the idea of the older generation trying to kind of ignore or forget what happened in the past, whereas the younger generation wants to directly confront those things.
Right. And that's important because the Patricia character in this film, she also leaves the studio. She disappears because she's figured out what's going on. And they kind of use her political affiliation as an excuse, more or less. They're like, oh, well, she got caught up in this. What do you expect will happen if you get caught up in this? And it's kind of like what you were just discussing, how this older generation is kind of just dismissing her views, her rebellion, which in the context of the film, it's more so to kind of cover up what's actually going on at the dance studio. But
yeah, but it reflects thematically kind of is a good connection though to the power dynamics. There's a fractioning between people that support Marcos, who's the old lady who, as we see throughout the film, or as we hear about throughout the film, wants to use someone to help extend her life more. Right. Whereas Madame Blanc is someone who seems more nurturing. I think we could argue whether or not she's a good character, a good person or not, but she is more of a nurturing person within the context of the film. And you see that there are different people supporting different ones. And it's kind of the old guard versus the new guard. The last film, we don't really see too much about the internal organizational things that are occurring within the coven.
Yeah, and she's far more of a complex character in this one than in the original, and she's played by Tilda Swinton, and she just does a great job of capturing that. It's interesting kind of how you're describing, like, is she good or bad? It's almost like, is she kind of like the middle ground character between these two generations, do you think, a little bit?
Yeah, because I feel like by where it goes, Susie is a benevolent ruler in like this coven, whereas Marcos they're using their powers to protect her, to make her a stronger leader, etc. Whereas you could argue whether, like, with what they're able to do, which is not fully explained, but it seems like they have the power as a community to uplift everyone and make each other better in certain ways or whatever. Like someone has certain abilities that, you know, another person can kind of pull energy from, so that way they can jump higher, et cetera, et cetera. But that person still can stay alive or something, you know. But what ends up happening is that they seem to be like going through girls to try to give life to Marcos, and that's just all self-involved stuff. And, you know, it's very easy to see a parallel there from like the old guard of Germany, and then this, you know, intermediary where they, like the Germany of that era, is kind of like trying to maintain a balance of sorts by like kind of trying to not really rock the boat too much, but they're kind of embracing the old ways a bit as well by, you know, like Blanc is, you know, hurts somebody in order for Susie to be a better dancer. And it has like these levels to it, and there's a complexity to it that I think you can kind of come to your own conclusions about how good a person is, whether something is, you know, is Madame Blanc more altruistic than I'm giving her credit for? You know, that's really kind of up to interpretation, but I think that's what makes it interesting.
Yeah, and there's a lot of this. It's certainly open to interpretation, and it certainly requires you to rewatch it. I think this was my second time seeing it, and I still feel like I haven't gotten the full grasp of it, which is very much a contrast to the original, which is kind of, you know, it's saying similar things, but it's much more black and white, and it's much more stylized. It's crazy. I mean, I would say I loved both films, by the way.
Me too.
I love them for different reasons. And I think that this is really a remake that was, you know, worth remaking. You know, you see some remakes nowadays that it's like, well, that wasn't really necessary. It didn't really have anything new to say. It didn't really improve on anything. And, you know, this film, it kind of felt like an extension almost of the first. More so than a remake. I don't know how you feel about that, but I don't know. Everything it expanded on, when I watched the original, it's things that I was like, oh, I would have liked to have seen more of this or more of that.
Yeah, like the dancing.
Yeah,
like,
the dancing. When I watched the original for the first time, I just kept waiting for them to get into that more, because it's something that's kind of just like ripe for the picking to make very cinematic. And I feel like they didn't kind of go into that as much. The dance studio in the first was more of a setting. Yeah. And in the remake, it really played into the dance sequences. And I thought that worked really well. That's something that I really wanted to see, and they came through with that.
Also, I'm not sure, I don't think the original film even hints at this, but in the remake, the dancing is the way that they put spells on people, the way that they conjure things to occur.
Right. You know? And that's something I mentioned when we were talking about the original in the last episode, is how I wanted to see more of that. And I was more interested in the spell casting and kind of the inner workings of that. And that's something that we got to see in the remake.
Well, another thing I think is interesting that we should talk about briefly anyway, is that Tilda Swinton plays 3 characters in this movie. And so I'm sorry, folks. I'm sorry. But right before we started recording, I mentioned something about it to Jason, and he did not know that Tilda Swinton played the guy, the Klemperer. And
psychiatrist, yeah.
Yeah, the psychiatrist. And I'm sorry, I did not know that he was not aware of this, because I would have waited for the podcast recording to reveal this to him. But
my mind was blown. Yeah. It really was. And I thought it was a dude. I really did. I didn't really think about it. I don't know. I mean, what an incredible performance. Right? And shout out to the makeup artists. I don't know if they were in the Oscar conversation, but they should have been. That's insane. Like, I don't know. I thought it was a dude 100%. And looking back, once you told me, I was like, oh, I can see that.
Yeah, because you can kind of hear her voice then once you know that.
Yeah, and I thought that was just kind of like to play up the character. But yeah, I thought it was like an unusually high-pitched voice, but...
Well, also, it's fair to think that because they kind of cheated by creating an actor's name to say, "Oh, this guy, he's the actor for this part."
Yeah, that's true. And the fact that there was even a debate, I think, is a testament to how effective it was.
Yeah, no, but it's interesting. So you have Tilda Swinton; she plays Madame Blanc, Klemperer, and Helena Marcos. An interesting article I read, which I think I'll put in like the show notes for people. This film critic, Britt Hayes, she wrote a piece for Birth Movies Death where she kind of gets into the psychoanalyzing of the film. And I'm going to say large portions of this are a little bit over my head as I'm a simple boy. But what I thought was interesting was that the three Tilda Swinton characters represent the id, the ego, and the superego. So Marcos would be the id, the instincts and impulses. Blanc would be the ego, so like reasons, common sense, creating a balance between id and superego. And then superego would be Klemperer, critical, moralizing, and it's the superego is created through guidance by parents and authority figures. It kind of, in some ways, there's like a push and pull of like what happens to Susie as she kind of self-actualizes throughout the movie, that in some ways is maybe a little more internal than, in some ways a little frustrating how internal it is, but that these kind of like characters are kind of like pushing her in this kind of direction, you know?
Yeah, you can kind of see the id, the ego, and the superego kind of manifesting in her at certain points too, which is, it's interesting. It's interesting to observe that transformation of that character.
Well, it's also, isn't it so interesting that Klemperer was, he was, what was it? Patricia's therapist. Okay.
Therapist.
So the therapist that is in the first Suspiria is Sarah's therapist, and that guy has one scene where he talks about witches for a second and then hands it off to another friend of his to do all the heavy lifting about talking about like the intricacies of witchcraft. And in this one, Klemperer is like almost co-lead in the movie.
He's a character, like, for sure.
Yeah,
like,
and
a constant presence in the film. And he even has his own subplot with his wife.
His wife, I guess, wanted to leave Germany during the rise of Hitler, and he didn't want to leave, so she left. And then he had never seen her since. And he's always assumed that she died. But it's this unresolved thing that he feels bad about, that he didn't leave with her sooner. And he's this gigantic sad sack throughout the whole movie. And it's very sad, you know? And it is interesting how they have that character who's filled with all this regret, but also they have him as like women coming to him saying, there are witches at this place. They want to do me harm. And then he's like, "Oh, you're making too much of this. This is a weird manifestation, mental issues, et cetera, et cetera." And like, so in some ways, he's kind of, I wouldn't say this as a malicious thing, but it's like he kind of didn't really learn that maybe his instincts aren't always the best to like know when danger is around the corner.
Well, I think he does. He kind of figures that out. And that's kind of part of his story arc, where he starts digging deeper into everything that's going on at this academy.
He's bearing witness, if you will.
Yeah. And he has a very, very interesting story arc, which I know we'll touch on a little later. But kind of going back into the film itself, I know one of the things we both agreed on is the fact that we like that there's a lot more sequences of dancing. And arguably the most memorable sequence is when Olga's character kind of gets mangled by a spell. This is the scene where
Olga is really upset about Patricia being gone and assumes that the witches, the coven, did something to her. And they are saying, well, no, like like we mentioned earlier, she was part of the Red Army faction. And we're like, well, she's living her truth. She's doing what she wants to do, and we can't really control her. Olga sees through that, right away and like yells at them. I think she calls them witches, right?
Yeah, that's actually the very last thing she says to them. She kind of storms out of the dance studio and she calls them witches in German, I believe.
So she leaves. She's storming away. And then as she's going, they're cross-cutting from her leaving to Madame Blanc asking around who would play the lead now. And then Susie raises her hand that she knows this dance because she's studied it.
Yeah, and it's one of those scenarios where it's like, oh, there's no way you know the dance. We've put months into this.
Yeah.
And she's trying to convince them.
I've watched the film many times.
Yeah, so what ends up happening is Tilda Swinton's character, Madame Blanc, she puts a spell on Susie. She kind of holds her hands and holds her feet. And what this does more or less is kind of attach her dance moves to Olga and kind of allows her to control her involuntarily. So Olga kind of ends up underneath the dance studio on the lower level in this room full of mirrors, this practice studio. And there's this incredible sequence where Susie's dancing and she's killing it and she knows all the moves. She was right all along. She had him down. But we keep cross-cutting between Olga's contorted body and Susie's kind of very fluid movements of this dance. And it's a crazy sequence. It's so memorable. It stuck with me. It's just a great sequence. And it kind of parallels, I think, the original, how we were talking about the very memorable death scene towards the beginning of that film. And I think this kind of mirrors that, where it happens a little bit earlier in the film comparatively, but it's just so memorable.
It's doing another riff on like a similar like idea, which is kind of trying to have like beauty contrasted with like violence. And with like the original Suspiria, the beauty is kind of in the way that the film looks and the set designs and all this stuff. And then you have like these violent images of what happens in that film. But in this one, it's kind of, you're literally editing back and forth between something that's like beautiful and then something that's like violent and ugly.
Yeah.
And knowing that one is creating the other. I do feel like there is some sort of opinion there about people suffering for their art or other people being hurt for others to succeed, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. I mean, just even kind of to take it back from like a technical level, I mean, the cinematography, sound design, and especially the editing, like props to the editing on that scene. It really, really kind of hammers home the, you know, kind of all the movements and the contortion and it's a brilliant scene. I love it.
It's edited together as like they're dancing with each other almost. Like she does this move and then she gets contorted and then it's really beautiful and ugly at the same time. And
she's like mangled. It's not like she's just inconveniently has like a twisted arm. It's like she's upside down and inside out and just all over the place.
It's not like she can walk it off.
She's getting thrown into mirrors and fluids coming out of her mouth and her eyeballs bulging out and her bones sticking out. It's really quite upsetting. And then at the end, all the matrons come in and kind of just drag her body away with large hooks.
Yes. And you almost wonder, like, they could pick her up. It's still effort to hold the hooks. Like,
yeah, it's almost harder to do that.
It's like just adding insult to injury. Like,
it's what they signed up for, John. That's the coven.
So as the film progresses, Sarah, like the original film, is kind of investigating what is happening at this school with the coven. And so she hears footsteps. And in this one, she also counts where they're walking. So she discovers a secret door in the mirror room to a corridor. And I gotta say, with this version, it did seem a little bit trickier to find the door.
It did, yeah.
There's no like blue little iris that you can turn, obviously.
Yeah, she kind of had to knock on the mirrors. Sarah seems to be much more of a crucial character because in the original, it's kind of Susie who's doing the digging and, you know, calling the psychiatrist and getting the inside scoop on the witches. But in this one, it's Sarah, who's more of a side character.
This also allows Susie to focus more in on the actual like dancing aspect.
Right.
So it's more of her like discovering her talents. And then you have Sarah kind of do the investigation. She interacts with Klemperer. When she goes through the corridor, she finds one of the hooks that they use to grab Olga. And she, as one does, just grabs it and leaves with it. So she definitely has, there's evidence that she was in a place she wasn't supposed to be.
Yeah.
Very smart.
I feel that's like horror film 101. If you like investigate a secret door, leave everything where it is. Like you're giving yourself away if you take one of their main tools. So then they're onto you.
They even complain about it later, like, "Oh, he dirtied it."
yeah. When they eventually give it back, it's not returned in the same condition.
Yeah,
which it was borrowed.
So Sarah she goes to talk to Klemperer. And, wouldn't you know it, he's got a little bit of an info dump for her about some of the things that Patricia told him. For him not really believing Patricia in most respects about what she's saying about a coven and all this stuff, he's really digging the mythology about it.
He does know a lot. And at the beginning, when we see Patricia, he even has these books on the occult and this and that. And I don't know, it's probably a matter of, okay, like multiple people are telling me the same thing. As a professional, I should probably listen. So I think he's kind of at that state. But yeah, at this point, he kind of goes into the details and talks about the three mothers a little bit, I believe.
Yeah, so I'm going to butcher these, but you know what? Whatever. There are these three mothers that supposedly existed before any other religion existed, so they're very powerful, of course. Mother Tenebrum, which means darkness. Mother Lacrimarum? I don't know.
Lacrimarum?
Sure, that means tears. And Mother Suspirium, which is sighs. So the first two, we're not dealing with those in this movie, so ignore that. But Mother Suspirium, we find out. We find
very
more
similar to the title.
Yeah, we'll find out more about her in this.
So when I first watched this, I thought it was size like Size, but it's size Sighs. I was like, oh, she's the big one. That's the big one.
And then when you see Marcos, you're like, she's definitely the big one. So he goes on to explain that there's different factions of people supporting Marcos or Blanc. Klemperer doesn't really seem to believe this stuff, but he does feel that, things could be dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he did let slip in that scene that it was believed that Marcos was actually Mother Suspirium.
Yeah.
Am I saying it right? Suspiriorium?
Suspiriorium? Yeah.
Suspiriorium. Okay. I've been saying it wrong this whole time. Look like an ass. When you watch it in the movie, everyone has like a thick German accent when they say it. That like, I don't know, I don't want to sound like a douchebag. Like
why did they not call it Mother Suspiria? We would be fine with that.
Yeah. Well, so apparently some of these other names are like references to other Argento movies, like Tenebrum. He has a film that he made in like, I think it was 1980, 1981 called Tenebrae.
Okay.
So they're kind of like allusions to his other movies, which, I think it's kind of neat.
Don't they call it like the Three Mothers trilogy or something?
Yeah. So I haven't seen the others yet. It is interesting how Guadagnino is of a newer, younger generation. So he's kind of reinterpreting like the old guard's perspective of what was occurring in the late 70s.
One other, we didn't touch on this yet. While we're just kind of talking about the contrasts of these films, is stylistically and visually. This film the remake is very bleak. It's
very beige.
It's almost an exact opposite of the original, which was very vibrant and operatic, as you said. And I don't know, what's your take on that? Like, part of me missed that. But then part of me understands it, like as a way to kind of separate it. I think it works, but
okay. So the original was a contemporary story that was taking place in like when the film came out. So you could put all these crazy visuals in it. It's got a fairy tale aesthetic that's maybe a little bit timeless. It looks new when we watch the Blu-ray now, but
yeah.
The remake is trying to be overtly telling you this is taking place in 1977. This is the context. And by having that, it's kind of giving an aesthetic of looking like an older film. It almost, I mean, I don't know, like it almost feels like it's hampered by that because it has to aesthetically try to remind you and tell you that this is not now, it is back then. I don't know. I didn't really have too much of a problem with it because I like the fact that this film like zigs when you think it's going to zag, and it does these different things. And
it's almost like they tried to separate it as much as possible visually. That's kind of what it felt like. And part of me is like, oh, kind of would have been fun to see what they did if they made it stylized like that.
I do think it is interesting how they use like red in this version.
Yeah, you do think of red a lot. Yeah, it's
I believe the dance sequence in the middle, don't they have like red ropes all over them?
Yeah, that's the performance of Volk, VOLK, which is the dance that they've been rehearsing for this whole time. So that kind of brings us to opening night of this performance. And so what's going on with Sarah at this point of the film?
So she's doing some investigating still,
she's done her digging. Yeah.
You know what? She hasn't done enough. She needs to find more evidence or whatever. And wouldn't you know it, she finds Patricia. And I guess she found Patricia to be disgusting now. So she ran away from her in terror.
Well, she's certainly not the Patricia that she knew. It's some sort of being that has manifested. It's not just like, oh, like you're not like I remember. I'm leaving you down here. So Sarah's freaked out. Like, where is she? Is she in the basement? This place is huge. I have no idea where she is.
So where their performance is at, that building, she like went downstairs. That's where Patricia was. So it's underneath everyone else. What I thought was like, I don't know why this bothered me more, but like as she's like running away, the witches decide, oh, we're just going to start creating a bunch of holes in the ground so she falls in them. Yeah. And then like breaks her leg. And that's terrifying, man. Like, I don't want to break my leg. That's scary to think about.
I don't want to run in general. That's horrifying as is. And then if people are creating holes.
You're like, I got a bad knee. Like, I can't handle that.
Not for me. Yeah.
And then they like patch her up.
They do, because they want her to go back out and perform, and she's kind of in this little like witchy trance, I guess.
So it's not, I don't think it's overtly stated, or maybe I'm a dum-dum, I don't know, but it seems like this is the event they're going to be taking like Susie's body for Marcos. And that's why they have Sarah all in a trance, because she's got to do her part. Right. She's got to do her stuff. And then you have Klemperer that's there. And they said earlier they wanted to have him as a witness to what happens.
Yeah.
But Susie, wouldn't you know it, goes off book and starts doing her own thing. And then Susie. That just messed everything up. This isn't jazz. You can't just go into a solo because you feel like it, So then Sarah just like plops down because the spell's been messed up. Thanks, Susie. And so, Madame Blanc, not happy. She yells at Susie about it. But what was kind of cool though, that scene is interesting because they're talking all telepathically.
Yeah.
And then like Susie starts talking in like real life. But I think what may be frustrating for some people when watching it is that it doesn't always give a good inner, like you don't know where Susie's at throughout all this because she's not privy to a lot, but we know that they're like grooming her to be like sacrificed for Marcos to live on. And she is vaguely aware that this is probably happening, but seems like okay with it, or at least outwardly seems fine.
After this performance of Volk, Klemper he's kind of out walking around, and he just kind of conveniently happens upon his wife, who he hasn't seen in years, and she is incidentally played by
Jessica Harper,
who played Susie in the original.
Yes. By the way, quick thing. If anyone at home who really enjoyed her performance in the original Suspiria, she's also the lead actress in the movie The Phantom of the Paradise, which is an awesome movie. It came out in 1974. It was a year before Rocky Horror Picture Show. And it's like a rock opera type of movie that is Phantom of the Opera, but it's about like this place called the Paradise, which is like where they have all these bands play. So they have all these different like genres of music, like the 50s doo-wop, the surfer things and stuff. And it's like this evil music producer who like steals the Phantom's his music to do some pop bullshit version of, and the guy gets mangled, and then he like haunts the Paradise trying to like exact his revenge. And the woman who is given like this music to sing is Jessica Harper. She's really good in that movie too. So if you liked her performance in Suspiria, check out Phantom of the Paradise. Very good movie.
Nice, good recommendation. No, I thought she did great in both of these films. That's really kind of my only exposure to her acting. So Klemper stumbles upon his wife. He doesn't quite understand it. Doesn't much care. He's thrilled and surprised to see her.
But it's interesting because this happens several times, and the first time I was a little confused by it, but basically he has like a cottage in East Germany, and I think his apartment's in West Germany. So he is constantly going back and forth between East and West Germany, and you kind of realize something's up when he just kind of walks on through, going from East Germany to West Germany, and no one's like, "Hey, who's that lady that's with you?" You know, like,
yeah.
Not exactly something that would happen in 1977. Like East Germany's like, they're in love, let them go. So, but when she disappears, though, heartbreaking.
It really is. So they kind of go on this romantic stroll. They're catching up. She's as real can be. And then we find out it's all a spell. He turns around, she's gone. And wouldn't you know it, he's in front of the dance academy. And then these matrons run out, they grab him, they take him inside.
Yeah. Then they make him naked.
And for those of you keeping score at home, we are 3 nude versus 2 clothed as far as the rituals go. So the nudes have it so far. So that brings us to the climax of the film, which is just bananas.
Yeah, it's gonna be that'll be hard to explain.
It's a wild. You got to watch it. I don't know. Where do we start with this?
Well, all right. So I'm not even looking at the notes. I'm just rolling with it. So
I'm going off the old memory.
Yeah, because we all know how good my memory is. So he's there. He's witnessing what's going on. And then you got Tilda Swinton. I should be specific. Because all 3 of them are there.
She's there times 3, yeah.
Yeah, so Madame Blanc is there, and she's telling Susie, like, hey, if you're not feeling up to it, don't do it, because it won't work if you if you're not fully invested. And Marco's not happy about this, so she cuts part of Madame Blanc's head off, like a little, like more than half. So kind of hangs forward. A lot of blood spurts out, but like it's still attached a bit, not fun.
Yeah.
There's something like almost like it's more troubling that it wasn't fully cut off. Like,
that it's like, maybe that was part of the spell, like severed head, but still alive spell. I don't know.
You get to watch the rest of what's going on,
And meanwhile, like Marcos is here looking like a Stretch Armstrong you put in a microwave or something. And she's just like she's just like melting almost.
Yeah.
She's just a hideous creature.
And also Marcos is like, she's not really selling Susie on like, hey, no, this will be great. It's more like, I'm getting so much out of this and you aren't.
Yeah.
And very weird way to tell someone what's going to happen, try to be a little more convincing. Anyway, so Susie's like, yo, let's go. Let's do it. And as they start to do things, Marcos says something about like deny her own mother or something to that effect. And we see death appear, and plot twist, Susie is actually like the reincarnation of Mother Suspiriorum.
Which she has been all along, and we kind of learn this in flashback, right? When around the same part where she says she has to reject her mother.
So I guess it's kind of like there was something inside of her guiding her towards this school. So it's like in a way of her kind of becoming more in touch with herself, not just her conscious self, but her subconscious, and that this is what she was meant to be. And she is not cool with anybody associated with Marcos at all. So she just gets Death to go, boom, you're dead. Boom, you're dead. And then there's heads exploding and all this stuff's happening. It is insane.
Just seriously, it's just like exploding heads left and right.
Just nuts.
So I guess my question is, I didn't quite pick up on kind of Susie's acceptance of this role. Is this something that she just kind of knew deep down all along and it just had to like come out in this situation? Or like when did her kind of acceptance of this happen? Or was she just always Mother Suspiriorum? And it's just like her destiny.
So I'm not sure, because I was reading online, there's a bunch of debate on this. So some people think that maybe she connected with Mother Suspiriorum and was able to kind of like harness her energy to destroy those around her, or it is that she was like reincarnated and then she didn't know who she was until as she's kind of like following this path or whatever and realizing like she's almost being led to this point or whatever. But I tend to feel like at this point, and I could be wrong if you feel differently, but I tend to feel like at this point it's starting to become more thematic rather than literal in terms of like what is occurring. So I'm not sure if the movie itself is very interested in like what are the details of like how that came to occur, I guess. I kind of wonder though, because if you're the thematic stuff that they've brought up before about like the new fighting against the old, and then she's actually a reincarnation of something from like prehistoric time or something, I don't really know how it fits together, but maybe a third watch will help me figure that out.
No, that's like what we're saying. There's so much to interpret here, and that's kind of one of the things that I wasn't clear on with this most recent watch. Is in the original, she's kind of fighting all this. Everything's a little off to her, and we know that, and she kind of wants answers. And in the remake, Susie's never really seems too concerned. She's kind of embracing her role. I was looking for a point in the film where you can kind of see her acceptance of all of this, but it's almost like it's predestined. Because it's like when she shows up for this ritual at the end, it's like she's down. And she's been briefed. She knows everything. And it's like she's all in at that point. So
it would be like if we only saw Star Wars A New Hope and then Return of the Jedi. So yeah, no, I'll have to, that's something to think about.
So yeah, I mean, with all this stuff, it's, as you can clearly see, there's a lot of debate on it, even, online and, amongst people discussing the film. And, I think that's what makes this film so complex and so much of an expansion on the original, kind of makes you think in areas where the original, didn't.
But it's also, I think it's so my connection to it has always been more of the political unrest of the era and it kind of reflecting this school and bringing to light these things that had occurred. But the film also, I think, has a lot to say, I think, about like art, femininity, motherhood, things of that nature. That there's a lot of interesting articles about that I think are very eye-opening.
I think you could take any number of those, just run with them and explore the themes. And
I think for me, what I kind of tend to remember the most kind of about, or that I question, I guess, is the last scene where Susie shows up at Klemperer's house and explains to him what happened to his wife.
He finally gets the closure that he needs. And before this, we should also mention what else goes down in the climax, how she kind of allows the other dancers like Pat and Sarah to kind of die peacefully. So she says like, how does she phrase it? She's like, what do you choose? Or what would you like to do or something?
Yeah, what do you need or something?
What do you need? And they say to die.
That's why I feel like she's like a benevolent ruler because she does that, and then Klemperer gets away, and then when she meets him later, she gives him closure, and she doesn't know him. We, the audience, know him, but she doesn't. And so she kind of explains that his wife was, they apprehended her as she was trying to flee south. She goes to a concentration camp. They bring everyone outside, and then they make them stand there until people start dying. And
it was something they brought like thousands of people
40,000
out for like a census or something.
Yeah.
And they just had to stand out there in the elements. And that's how she ended up dying. She says something to the extent of she was alone but she was not afraid or something like that.
Yeah. Well, she was with she was huddled up with other women and they weren't afraid. Yeah. And that
she was cold but she was not afraid.
That scene, I cried both times where she it remembers her husband, I guess the first date they went on, and oh man, just waterworks.
Susie does specifically say her final thoughts. She was thinking of the date where you first held her hand and you guys went to a concert.
He's crying and he's getting kind of this closure from it, but it is kind of causing him a lot of pain dealing with all this. He has a lot of guilt from all of this, that he could have saved her if he would have left Germany earlier and listened to her. And also there are these other women that are now dead that he didn't really listen to or didn't act quickly enough to help. And she kind of relieves all of that pain.
Yeah.
I think it was something like that, people need to bear witness and remember, but he was not someone who was in a position of power to make these big changes or something that could have prevented all these things from occurring. So she's showing him mercy by making him forget these things that happened so that way he can live the rest of his days at peace.
Right. So he gets his closure, and then she kind of does this, Men in Black neuralizer thing where he just kind of forgets, all the bad stuff. And yeah, I don't know. And it kind of closes with closure for his story. We kind of do that slow pan in on the initials of him and his wife.
Oh, that made me tear up too.
Yeah. It was kind of an unexpected ending, but it was nice.
Yeah. It's interesting how much, I don't know, I felt invested in that plot line by that point, when it's not something that was in the original at all. And it ends up being kind of an emotional through line that really works when I think this new one is not really an emotional kind of story.
I definitely paid a lot more attention to his character this time around because I knew how significant he was in all of it. Mm-hmm. I apparently didn't pay enough attention to realize it was Tilda Swinton the whole time, but that's neither here nor there. But I thought it was a great expansion of, a character that was kind of touched on more or less in the original.
I'm going to ask a very difficult question. All right.
Okay. All right.
Gun to your head. Which Suspiria movie do you want to exist and which one do you want to disappear?
Wow. I wasn't expecting that question. It's so tough. It's not I don't know. I don't really think it's that sort of debate because
they feel so different. It's such different experiences.
Both serve their own purpose, and I don't think the remake would exist without the original. So I don't know, but they are so different. It's really tough.
For me, adding to it, I think I have a little bit more of an affinity for Luca Guadagnino as a filmmaker. Okay. So it's kind of I don't know. It's tough because I kind of would be I don't want to lose one of my favorite Luca Guadagnino movies, but also, Argento's best movie, basically. That would suck.
It's tough, and I think that's a testament to how effective it was as a remake. So I think it did all the right things that any good remake should. And I don't know, if you're talking gun to my head, I'll probably keep the original. But I don't know. Depends on the day.
Yeah. I love both of them equally, so I'm not going to choose.
Okay. Cool. What a bitch.
Well, if I'm the one with the gun in my hand, I don't.
Oh, you have the gun. I didn't know you had the gun. You didn't clarify that. You said gun to your head. You didn't say, I, John Hoyer, have a gun to your head.
Who else would have a gun to your head?
That's true. If anybody would, I guess it would be you.
Answer my text.
Anyway. So, are you batting 1,000 with the Suspirias? Are you joining this cult?
Am I joining this cult? Well, I guess my answer would have to be hell yes. So, like we talked about last week, I want to learn to be a great dancer. And now that Susie is in charge of everything, she can make me forget about all of my many faults and failings as a person.
So you're letting her stay in charge. Normally, you have some motive or some scheme to take over the cult, but in this one, you're fine with it.
She seems to be doing a pretty good job.
With, Mother Suspiria arm, yeah. Okay.
She seems to be doing good. So I mean, you can't. If anything, I mean, what Trevor was saying about being like a hired goon or something, like I could, maybe I could do it for this one.
Yeah. No goons in this one, really.
Maybe that's what Trevor and I could, sign up for. We'll both be goons for this.
Relatively goon-free. Yeah. There are the cops that come investigate, and they kind of put a spell on them and freeze them, and then take their pants off and kind of make fun of them. And
yeah, their peepees.
Yeah. That wasn't Tilda Swinton 2, was it?
No, but that was like, I found that to be kind of creepy. Like the way they're laughing at them like that. And it's just kind of a scene that comes out of nowhere.
And it's also kind of telling how Susie doesn't really respond to it.
Yeah.
She's just kind of like, she doesn't tell anybody. She's just kind of like, oh, well, I guess that's what happens.
All right, then. No, but yeah. I think like the idea of the cult, this group being kind of more, there's an interpretation that allows it to be somewhat more of a benevolent group, one that, harnesses their collective energies to help each other or build each other up, or there's a possibility for that anyway. We're probably the only cult thus far that you could join and not be a terrible human being.
Yeah, he still did a lot of horrible things. But since like the film itself, it is open to kind of interpretation on where this is going and all that jazz.
It could be, the start of a really good group, as Susie takes over. So I'm in, of
course you are.
I'm ready to bend the knee for Susie. What about you, Jason?
No, 1,000 times no. After witnessing that climax, I am out because, oh man.
You don't want her on your side?
That's what happens when things go according to plan. Like, I don't want to know what happens when things go wrong. Like, my goodness. I don't know. I'm out. Hopefully one of these, I know we're running out of movies, but hopefully one I kind of gravitate towards and can give it a shot. I don't know. We'll see.
Anything else, Jason, or we good?
I think we covered it, man. This one was fun.
It was a good time. And next week we will be reviewing Midsommar.
Oh yeah.
So everyone, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Please. Give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or something.
Or Spotify. Wait, you can't rate on Spotify.
You can't?
You can listen.
Okay, well, you can rate on Apple Podcasts. And actually, only rate if you're going to give us 5 stars. If you're going to give us 3 stars, no, fuck off. Well, I won't say fuck off, but
I don't know. 3's okay. I mean, it's about volume now,
4
right?
or 5. Come on.
4 or 5.
This episode was pretty good.
Just give it a listen. Give us your time.
Please.
Check it out. I personally use Spotify. John uses Apple.
Yeah.
So it's everywhere.
You know what? Do whatever you want. Everyone, I love you all very much, and stab you later.
I was like, oh, she's the big one. That's the big one.